Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Dawnis. Happy Wednesday, wherever you might be joining us today. I'm Emily Gilpin. I'm the managing director of a National Observer series called First Nations Forward, dedicated to sharing stories of success, sustainability, self-determination in First Nations across so-called Canada. And I'm happy that Dawnis Kennedy has agreed to speak with us this morning. I've had the great opportunity to interview Dawnis before, recommended by Leonard Monkman, and you blew my mind. Our conversation really stuck with me. Never manifested quite into the story that we had discussed, but here we are again, bringing that thread full circle.
Yeah.
Drop that thread just to pick it up again. So, Dawnis, please introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, I'll start with this. Minawanago gishiko nindash nakas, wabajeshi and dodem, bagawanish kozibing and donji, nijing mide, Ojibwe Anishinaabe and Dao. And I guess that's my traditional introduction. That's my spirit name. I'm Happy Day Woman. I'm Martin Clan. I'm from what's now known as Roseau River Anishinaabe First Nation, if you look on like the Indian Act Registry, but where Bagawanish Bing is one of our communities, and another one is Jibashko De Yong as well. And I am an Ojibwe Anishinaabe woman as well. I am European from my dad's side, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Dawnis. We're happy to have you here. It's beautiful to hear you speak your language. What does Anishinaabe mean?
Oh, that's my nation. I guess I forgot that part. I just realized that one of my computers is turning on. I
Oh,
will shut that off in case anybody's trying to get a hold of me.
we
And
were just discussing how we need to turn off all of our technology in order to just to be present
yeah,
here.
Anishinaabe speaks to who I am on my mother's lineage. The people, they're often known as Ojibwe, which is in reference to the language we speak, but Anishinaabe is a much greater group of people, Indigenous people, who their traditional territory is like all around the Great Lakes, basically. And as far as our relatives as well, like the Ojibwe are part of the Anishinaabe, which is a much wider group that spans most of North America. I guess we count our relatives widely.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm so happy that you've agreed to join us this morning. Last time that we chatted, you told me a lot about kind of what you were studying, both in, the academy and outside in your own life and community and relationships. Can you tell me a little bit about that, a little bit of what you have been involved in studying and in and outside of, the academy or school as we think we know?
Yeah, well, I can tell you, most people know me for Anishinaabe law, like Anishinaabe Onakinagewin, which is our traditional law, which is different than our law, Aboriginal law, or even Indigenous law, Indigenous rights law, or Canadian law, or Indian law, or international Indigenous rights law. Is our law, the law of our people, Onakinagewin. And so that's kind of what I'm known for in the academy, but it's hard to be comfortable with that for myself personally, because that law is, I'm just a baby.
Yeah.
just looking towards that law. Like, it's what my interest is, it's what my belief is, it's what I rely upon. But when it comes to being knowledgeable in that law, like, we look to our elders, we look to our language speakers, we look to our ceremonialists. And so there's so many people who are further along in carrying that law that I look up to and that I follow and learn from. So I speak about it, and I've pursued it and as a student. And so I'm kind of known for that. I was asked, to speak as a legal expert at the, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls inquiry in Winnipeg as an expert on Onakinagewin. And I was qualified as an expert in teaching about Anishinaabe Onakinagewin in a Western institution by culture-based educational methods. So I qualified a lot.
Right.
I'm not an expert in Anishinaabe law, but that's what I like to talk about. That's what I like to learn about. That's what I like to share about. And, you know, that's what I've made a lot of mistakes in pursuing myself.
How do you come to understand your responsibilities in what can and can't be shared and what is and isn't yours to speak on or to share? How do you understand that? Who do you go to? Where do you go?
I'd say that's probably the most difficult thing for me, because there's many people who have different understandings of that, different opinions about that, but also they make different choices about that. And I think for me, what I look to is, why am I speaking? You know, when I was asked to speak as a legal expert, I was nervous. I gave them a bunch of other names. And but I'm in this position because I do have legal degrees, because I have a Bachelor of Arts with a Justice System certificate. That's where I started off with. I have a Bachelor of Law from the University of Toronto. I have a Master's of Law from the University of Victoria, and I have
Damn.
and I've run away from, I've lapsed on a Ph.D. of law in from Toronto in SJD, a Ph.D. of law. So I did my studies and I did my candidacy, and I'm all but dissertation and kind of lapsed there. So it's based on those credentials that I was asked to be a legal expert. Whereas the people who I look to, like my grandmothers, the elders, like the speakers who I learned from, they didn't have those legal degrees. So they weren't seen as experts. So what I didn't know, it was a really difficult choice to make. There were reasons that people were choosing to boycott the hearing as well. And so there was quite a number of things in the air. And I did talk to some of my grandmothers who said, you know, you're being asked to speak, and we're not being asked to speak. Just go forward and do your best. You know, so one of us is speaking. And what I did is I gave tobacco to my grandmothers who were there, and I asked them to witness for me, and I asked them to stop me if I overstepped or if I needed to be corrected. I asked them to govern me. And regardless of whether they had standing, it was like a court, like rules of procedure. And I said, regardless, just stop me. And so that's what I did. I find it really a difficult decision, but why I want Anishinaabe law is different than why I first went to school. I went to school to learn, but when you're going to university and you're going to school, you're also looking for a degree. You're not only looking to learn, you're also looking to be recognized. You're also looking to find your way to a career. You're also looking to not only to learn something and know something, but to be seen as somebody who knows something, who is knowledgeable, who's an expert, you know, in study. And so that's why I started going to university. I went as a high school dropout. I went as a mature student. So for me, I wanted to, you know, go back to university. I wanted to go back to Western education, and I wanted to do it differently. And I wanted to finish something. but you know, for me, that's different than why I want to know Anishinaabe law. The reason I want to know Anishinaabe law is because I want to live a good life. And it's difficult. I could take 10 PhDs to learn how to be Anishinaabe in this society. That's difficult because all of our traditional governance structures, they're operating, but they're operating under stress, under generations of colonial stress. And they're in distress. They're being revitalized by us, but there isn't somewhere where I can go and say, okay, do I have the permission of the nation? You know, there isn't really, like, there's guidelines, but it's different in every community. I've traveled quite a bit, so I have a lot of people that I've learned from. And for me, I try to think about, why is it that I'm sharing this? Why is it that I'm learning this? Because I approached people to learn how to live my life. That's why I approach people, to be able to make good decisions in my life, to be able to carry that for myself and for my community, to be able to heal something in me, and to be able to be part of the work, the healing work for our community, for our families, and for our society. So I guess that's a question I ask myself. Am I still doing that work? And am I being honest about that work? Because if people approach me, I don't want them to stop at me. That's what I think of, like with university, you have these experts and you can consult this one expert, and then you found an answer or an output. And for me, our ways and our laws as Indigenous people, we're rebuilding our entire communities. All of those relationships, that's the work. And I don't want people to stop at me. If I want to maybe share, this is what it has meant to me to learn who I am, to learn a little bit of the introduction that I can do, the language, the little bit of the law that I carry with me, that I rely upon, that's helped me to live my life in a good way. You know, and I want people who see that and want to approach. I don't want them to only approach me. If that's something they want to live, you know, I'll tell them, these are the people I sat with. These are the ceremonies I went to. This is the community I've been a part of. You know, these are the people that I've learned from. These, you know, and I want them to start that work as well. I want them to join in that, because it's more than just about knowing an answer. Like, when I first started, that was one of my mistakes. I was looking for like the Ojibwe way. I wanted to know the law. And you know, I'd been trained in Western law. So when I went back, and I was like, okay, I went to the library, and I was really good at like finding things, like even obscure things, because I was really committed, right? So I made this big list, you know, Ojibwe law, Anishinaabe law, Native law, Indian law, Red Man's law, like, you know, like every single description I could come up with. And I felt every book, and I had all these big stack of books. And then I was like, ooh, like, I'll be okay. I'll be able to write this PhD. And I had this big stack of books, and I could just take 3 years and go through them. And then I started reading them. And it was like watching a silent movie, you know, narrated by somebody who didn't have the script. It was like seen from the outside, and it wasn't what I'd grown up seeing and knowing. So it was like somebody looking for all the rules. Like, this is when people would be banished. And these are the circumstances under which you can banish people from the community. This is the circumstances under which you can kill people. You know, because to Europeans, that is law, like a punishment. That is the law in some people's minds. And so that was really influencing what I was learning. And I actually threw up outside the library. After reading all of that, I literally threw up. And there's much better books I can recommend after, like that have been written after this time period. But when I first went, that's how it was. And I was sick, and I
And
offered.
you were reading books written by non-Indigenous people
Yeah,
about Indigenous
yeah,
laws,
yeah.
all the
Yeah,
mm,
and so for me, and really old ones sometimes we were like in the rare section because I
mhm,
wasn't satisfied with just like the text saying this is Anishinaabe law or this is Indigenous law, or, and have there's like all the Western law, and they'll have like a list of
mhm.
characteristics, and then European law and a list of characteristics. I wanted to see, what law are you talking about? How did you find that information? Who was learning? And so I was like chasing footnotes.
Mhm.
And a lot of
Right.
times they didn't lead anywhere.
Yeah, you're like,
Yeah.
where am I going to end up here? Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of times they ended up in like at Locke or Kant or Hobbes. And
Right,
you've never met
exactly.
an Indigenous person.
Thank you,
Like
Dawnis.
most of them
Please.
are like that. And I was like, I can't do this. Like, I didn't know much about Anishinaabe law, I thought at the time. But what I was taught by my community and my family, I used that. I was taught how to find mentors and how to be a helper. I was taught that by my grandmother mostly, but also by my uncles because they sought out teachers. My aunties, they sought out teachers, and they told stories. Our family told a lot of stories. So I heard, and they took us to ceremonies. So I got to hear other people telling stories about their family. And so I kind of knew how to find someone when I went to a new community. I would ask my family, do you know anybody in this community? Because I think we're always looking, I don't know, for me as an Anishinaabe, I don't know about other Indigenous people, but I'm always looking for something that's real. Who's real? What's real? What is real about me? What is real about us, about who we are? Because I've been told so many different things. Because I read the same books everybody else read growing up in school. The fact that I was the one Native kid in class didn't make a difference to what I was consuming.
Mm.
I still consumed it. I still internalized that. I still, started from there. I had other experiences in my family and in my community to challenge that, but that was still my baseline. I was raised outside my community, and I would travel back home. But even, among my family who are raised inside the community, they're still using books usually 5 years out of date.
That's right.
When I was growing up, they used the same books that were used in my school,
Right.
often more out of date, often less variety, often, because they had less budgets. That's changing now, but that's how we grew up, with those stereotypes in our minds.
Mhm.
So I'm always kind of questioning and wondering, like, do I just accept what's told about me? Because I did that once, and it didn't lead me to a good place when I just accepted everything I was told when I was a kid. If I would have accepted everything, um, I probably wouldn't have a lot to live a good life with. I challenged that. My family challenged that. There's times that I remember, sitting outside, sitting outside in the hallway outside school where they're doing "God Save the Queen" and and "Oh Canada." I like sat outside. My mom pulled me from French class because they wouldn't offer Ojibwe, and she said she already knows what
Yeah, she
one
doesn't need to
colonial
know.
language. If you're not going to teach her own language, like, then don't teach her another one. And so I
Mhm.
ended up with a spare. um, but those are the kind of things for me. I was always searching. I always felt like I was feeling that. That's probably because I talked about my mom.
Mm.
She was my first teacher, and I was with her for 17 years. But I watched her doing the same thing. She didn't go to residential school. She was pulled because she had tuberculosis,
Mhm.
and she spent time in the sanatorium.
Mm.
And then she went on because she'd been isolated from everybody else except the nurses. she went on to go to St. Mary's Academy boarding school. She was one of the first like Indigenous women to go to school in mostly non-Indigenous school academy, and it was a boarding school in Winnipeg. But I saw her struggle with relearning who she was or learning who she was as an Anishinaabe, and the nervousness and the wondering, and just like it's so intense because it's so meaningful to you. You don't want to make a mistake, and you're always wondering like who to listen to because you hear many different things.
Right.
But what I did was I would ask my family, is there somebody? And they would talk about people, and sometimes I would say, oh yeah, I met these people, and then they wouldn't say nothing. Sometimes I'd say, oh yeah, that's so and so, that's who they're related to, those are, and then sometimes it was just silence. And then it took me a while, but they weren't gonna determine my choice. But sometimes when I heard that silence, I'd be like, oh, maybe I'll be a little bit more careful. you know and then when I would talk with people that they had introduced me to or talked to me about, then I would look at them and see who they were working with. I would ask them, do you know anybody in this area? Do you know anybody who does this? And I would keep hearing until I found a name that kept coming up again and again and again, and then they'd be on my list. And then if they had a speaking engagement, or if they were doing a ceremony, or if they were doing work, I would show up, and I would just keep showing up. And that's how I picked to be more mentors. And I use that in academia. I just threw out that big long books and doing comprehensive lists. And I think I might be by myself. I don't know if people are still out there, but I can only see myself now.
I'm back.
Okay. And I was like, all of a sudden it just went quiet.
Yeah, right. The internet is a great teacher.
Yeah.
Just pops off sometimes, and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, this is the time of uncertainty. I'm just embracing it.
Yeah.
But you still got folks here paying attention, so.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of how, for me, I ended up using all those skills in academia.
Right.
So instead of choosing people based on like their awards or the books that they wrote, I didn't read their books first. I didn't want to read ahead of time. I wanted to learn from the people, not from the opinions. Because I'm always looking for someone, like, I want to learn how to live life well. I don't just want to learn how to excel at a career. I don't want to learn how to just get the grade. I want to learn how to make good decisions in my life. I want to learn to create community. I want to learn to create change so things can be different than the way that they were for me. And I want to learn how to continue the good parts that I rely on that sustain me through a lot of trauma. And I want to learn how to pass those on. And so those were my guides. And that's what I would do. I would just sit and I would watch. I'd ask people who I trusted if they knew anybody, and I would keep asking. And then I would widen my circle, and I would be sitting there and I'd watch at conferences. And I wouldn't watch it what they were talking. No, not just when they're talking. I would watch when they were listening. And I noticed when people listened as much to the people who are commenting and asking questions as they did to the speaker who was raised up on a podium. And as much to the students as they did to the professors. And I would I would watch that. And then I would watch them with their students and see well, who has confident students? Because that's another thing when I look at learning from a traditional person or an elder, I always want to pay attention to their helpers. How are their helpers, and how do they treat each other, and how confident are they in themselves? And that's who I want to learn from. I want to learn with people. I want to learn with a group of people. because I don't want to just learn the information. I don't want to just learn the information. I don't want to just learn, the answers. I want to learn how to work with people, how to resolve conflict, how to create safety, how to have fun and have nurturing environments. That's, to me, what blossoms within Onakinagewin, within our law. That we can be who we came to this physical world to be, with each other and learn from each other. So I did that. I threw away all my books and I created this circle. I created this circle thing and to explain to my committee, who were great, but I put a circle and I said, this is the big circle. And the big circle has a bunch of people who are non-Indigenous people talking about Indigenous people for non-Indigenous audiences. I'm not supposed to be reading that. I wasn't part of the audience. So, and that's why it's so damaging. So that's the outside. And if you make me read all these people who everybody's citing, first, how much of me is going to be left when I jump that hurdle? Because it's in my mind.
Right.
And it's my starting frame. And then if you go inside the circle, you see there's Indigenous people who are writing about Indigenous people for non-Indigenous audiences. And you can tell because it's been screened, for, peer-reviewed publication, or the website has been, it's not for us. It's by us, but it's not for us. And it's about us, but it's not for us. And then there's non-Indigenous people who are writing for Indigenous people about Indigenous people, but it's not from us. It's for us and about us, but not from us. And then at the very center is like the bullseye, my bullseye. And that was Indigenous people writing for their people, of their people, not about their people. It was of us. It was from us, and it was for us. And then I said, and this is where I want to start. And if I can't find enough, I'll go to the outer circle. And if I can't find enough there, I'll go to the next outer circle. And if I can't find enough there, I'll go to the outer circle. So there was like my circle by us, about us, for us. And then there was a circle where it was about us, and either by us for others or by others for us. And then there was a circle where it was just about us. And if I plotted all of the books that I had access to, the majority were in the outer circle, like this big cement wall that you had to jump over the hurdle before you could even ask your question. Right? And so I started there. And what I found was I didn't really have enough access to what I wanted. I mean, I found some sense. There's some by other nations. I was really like, I wanted to be Ojibwe centric because I'm Ojibwe. So I was like, well, I really like, and I really admire like some of these other nations who have like authors that are very prevalent. And I was like, yeah, I would really like to learn from, I have a list of people I would love to learn from. But I was like, but then I'm still just like wishing, like we had just the anniversary of the Kanesatake reclamation, and that to me was like, that inspired me. But at that time I was like, oh, they're so cool.
Look at those warrior Ganagehaga.
I know, it could have been like Ongwe, but it wasn't. That's not what I wanted. I wanted to feed who I was as Ojibwe. So I wanted only Ojibwe, and then I wanted certain things, questions I wanted answered, and I couldn't find a lot of the material that I was looking for, and that would help me make sense of what I heard in ceremony, and then what I knew about like the Indian Act and what decision making was happening in the community, and then what I knew about life. about growing up and my life and my family and my community and the real issues that are happening, like abuse, addiction, death, murder. How do you get back up again? How do you keep going? How do you prevent? How do you create safety? How do you create healing? Those are the kind of questions I wanted to know about. And so when I couldn't find them in books, I would look for oratory. So I would look at recordings from RCAP's transcripts for the testimony. I would look at, instead of just looking, say, if you do this with the Delgamuukw case, it's really interesting. Instead of looking for the case and the decision, keep going back to the trial and go to the transcripts of the people giving evidence, and it's totally different. So I started looking at things like that. I started looking at the recordings of, there were a lot of youth and elder gatherings in the 80s that were recorded. So I found transcripts for that. And then I just started going to speakers. And I started saying, you know what? I actually kind of left academia altogether and just went to community, straight to community. These are the speakers I want to hear.
Yeah.
And then these are the opportunities I have to hear them. And I would go. But at the same time, I went to inform myself. I went for me. So I didn't want to take that and then write that down and publish that to show my knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to grow my capacity to make good decisions. Mm-hmm. I wanted to grow my capacity to say, this is something I want to hear. I wanted to grow my own kind of like freedom from looking for stuff that's real and not real, or people that are real or not real. I wanted to stop looking for authenticity.
Right.
And what's authentic. I wanted to start saying, like, you know what? I like that. I really like that. I value that. That connects to me. That helps me to understand things that I heard when I was a kid. That helps me to understand things that I see in the world. That helps me to understand when things go well and why they went well, and when things went wrong and why they went wrong. Like me going into the library, think I'm going to learn about Onakinagewin from books, right?
Written by Kant, by descendants of Kant's Locke and Hobbes.
I know, and then just ending up with an upset stomach. Like, that's what I wanted to grow. And then what do I have to share? Like your original question way back. What do I know? What have I earned? Because I've heard a lot of things. I can repeat a lot of things, and I always want to, for me, when I'm carrying forward things that I've heard from others, I want to acknowledge them, acknowledge their names, and I want it to be like a public forum, not something somebody told me straight in a healing where I was asking for healing for me, and they told me something. Like I want to use appropriate and information, and I want to do it for a real reason, because somebody's asking me for something, and they've asked others, or they've sought out and they're specifically asking me. And I want to share from something I've earned, not just something that I heard, but something that I've spent time thinking about, considering, stuff that I've tested in my own life, and stuff that I live, stuff that I rely on to live. How do I make a good life? How do I make decisions? Because there's a lot of conflict in the world just trying to live Anishinaabe. And that's, for me, that there's conflict within Canadian society, but there's also conflict within my Indigenous community. There's conflict, it seems, trying to do your best. There's conflict then in your household. At least in my household, I have to make decisions every day about where I put my only resource, which is my time, my energy. And so the people that I really look up to, like I found mentors in the academy that live well as well. You know, they live their life. I didn't only go see them at conferences. Like I would say, hey, because I'm not good at making appointments. I would say, hey, like, well, what do you have planned? They'd say, well, I'm kind of busy right now. I'm gonna go do this, pick up groceries, I have these errands. I was like, I could come with you. You know?
You sound like me.
I could carry bags. And
Yeah, I have helping hand. Yeah.
I would go on errands. Like people would be like, well, I have to pick up this for, you know, from the bookstore for my daughter or this for that. And I'd say, well, I'll take along. Like, you know, we don't have to sit and have your attention. I'll just come. Because that's how I was trained as a helper, to help, you know, elders. Because people are coming to them for the questions, not to me. They're coming to them and I get to like listen in. Like
Right.
and then I carry the bags. You know, I might have a law degree, but really that's where I was doing my learning, was
Mhm.
by carrying the bags or putting stuff out or packing stuff away, or that's my level of contribution to ceremonies. And I'm good with that.
Mhm.
I'm good with that. I like that I have many people ahead of me that I'm looking to, that people come to, and I'm learning kind of on the sideline. And to me, for me, that's how I want to see that flourish. I want to see us learning how to learn in contexts as real human beings from real human beings, so that we're not just taking knowledge that, you know, that I'm not taking knowledge that then I know something, that I'm actually part of responding to a request, to a tobacco request, that I'm helping. And I'm using that to help make good decisions in my life with my time, which has become a lot more challenging lately, I have to say,
Mhm.
with like COVID-19 and like the state of emergency and working conditions. It's really shone a light to me again. And I found a lot of the skills that I put in place with decision making have helped me make good decisions.
What
Um,
are some of those skills?
mm, I guess prioritizing. I found, you know what, like, I mean, I'm here with my son. We took him out of school even before the school shut down. And for me, I think like he came home and he's in a bilingual school, so he learns both Ojibwe and English, but
Mhm.
he's assessed on an English only standard for
Hmm.
like grade levels. And
Mhm.
so he'd kind of internalized some of the struggles from the English side. So he came home, and when we were doing work together, you know, doing the assignments, you know, I heard him, and he's only 7. He said, um, like, I'm stupid. I'm just stupid. And for me, everything stopped then. And I threw out all the assignments. I'm hoping that his teachers aren't watching this. But they know I kind of threw out most of the assignments, only the ones he wanted to do. And then I had to start from scratch. And we did lots of cooking, and we did, you know, like the stuff I remember learning from my grandmother, like
Yeah.
her getting ready for a funeral. Those, like the decision making capacities that I make, like the best decisions I make, I'm relying on those experiences. When everything stops, like when somebody passes, for her, everything stopped. And they started putting soup on. They went and got cloth. They went and got tobacco. They went and got gifts. You know, they gathered some people together, and we would go, even if that wasn't our family member, go, go help take care of kids, go clean the hall, go, you know, feed the people. You know, those are the kind of things. And then eventually, like my family, they conduct funerals in our community, traditional funerals. So then tobacco would come, and there would be that, and then there'd be lots about you know, ceremony and responding to other people's needs. And I was like, that's what I remember and I relied on. It wasn't what I learned sitting in class. Like, I'm happy I know how to get good grades, and that gave me self-esteem for a short period of time. But that's not what I rely on when I have tough decisions to make. And when I'm seeing something I actually would rather not see, but I don't want to stop seeing what's real. And when I made those choices, I said, well, those are the things that meant something to me. So let's package something up and send a gift to somebody. We'll know with COVID, people are struggling. Who do we know who could use something? So help him put his hands to that work to make something. Let's cook something for somebody. Let's go drop off some food and tea for some elders. Let's go, and we did those things together. We started doing sharing circles, which was one of the assignments he kept from his Ojibwe class. We did sharing circles every evening. And he says, and I'm used to a certain kind of protocol on sharing circles, but my son, he said, oh no, this is how you do sharing circles. He said, you have to say your name, you have to say this, you have to say Buju Anin, not just Buju, you have to say Buju Anin. Because my teacher says, and then he says, and then you have to say 3 things you're grateful for, and that struck such a good chord with me because my kuku, that's how she was. For me, I made a choice. It was a really difficult choice for me. I had been given the Trudeau Foundation scholarship, which was a really difficult scholarship to get. They asked me, I remember being asked, why do you deserve this scholarship more than anybody else? It's like $250,000. And I was like, what? Like, really, that's the question? And I was like, this is so counter to Anishinaabe thinking, and to think of that, I've got an overdeveloped sense of responsibility because I was raised around addiction, and because our society isn't in a good way right now. If we're really honest and we really look, and we don't look away, we don't give in to the temptation to look away. If we really look, our society is not well. Our community is not well. And many of us are not well. And so for me, it's like that kind of willingness to look. Why would I say I'm more than somebody else? Our traditional societies were taught everybody has a role, everybody has a purpose, everybody has a name among Anishinaabe. Everybody has a work to do, an important work, a significant work that they came into this world to do. And only their spirit knows that. Nobody else can tell them that work. There's elders and gifted people among us who give us hints by giving us our names, by speaking of our clans, by, being there when we're in crisis, by showing us their choices and the way that they live and the way that they walk in the world. Those are the ones that I look to. For me, to say I deserve it more than anybody else, it's counter to the way that I want to see the world. And so for me, that was hard. The whole process was hard. I think I broke down, going through the process, I broke down and actually had to call my, the people who were my referrals. And I said, oh, I don't think I did very good. And I'm really sorry I wasted your referral. Because you could have recommended somebody else. And I just had to be honest, and I don't think it went well. Because I started from a totally different place. I ended up getting the scholarship, and it was hard because of the name attached.
Yeah.
I faced a lot of messages from people about being a sellout and, all that stuff as well. So it was from both sides. And then I faced some people saying, oh, well, yeah, you're the native scholar, out of the 14, oh, you're the native one. So I faced all of that, but the community itself, I was really happy to be a part of. And then I couldn't sleep. And I was getting stressed. I had a colleague pass away in my master's suddenly, the late Perry Shawanda, who was also a very good friend. And, so I'd taken time to greet his family, to go and notify his partner, and to I took time off to go to the funeral, to go to the services, and I put aside all my school for my master's. And UVic was really great about that. They even paid for my airfare.
Good.
I was doing both my master's and my PhD at work together at the same time. And I thought, oh, that's why I'm stressing, because I have, it's just this stress cycle. And I went to the school and I got supports, and I went to a psychologist and I got supports, and it still wasn't helping. And I ended up finding out, I ended up going to a place. For me, it's supposed to be anonymous, but I go to adult children of alcoholics sometimes, because I'm reparenting myself. I saw addiction when I was raised, and that's really impacted the way that I live my life and make my choices. And so I seek healing that way too. And I ended up telling my story, ended up telling why I couldn't sleep. And then all of a sudden I realized, you know what? I need help that's beyond this. And I went home to my grandmother, and I gave my auntie tobacco, and I went out on my first fast. And my aunt was already going fasting. I just tagged along on her fast. I didn't prepare nothing. I didn't prepare a giveaway. I just went because I was sick. And I could remember my dream then. And I had a dream about my mom and caregiving for her when she was terminally ill when I was growing up. Mm-hmm. And it was a nightmare. And I was like, oh, that's the thing that's waking me up. And I worked with that for a while. And I said, well, when I told the story of that dream, it's almost like it lifted. And it wasn't my mom and me caregiving for her when she was young. It was my grandmother who needed caregiving at that time. And I was putting my memory of taking care of my mom in front of that need that I wasn't willing to see, and that was waking me up. And as soon as I saw that, I said, okay, I'm gone. And I left. I took a plane ticket and I went to my grandmother's, and I talked to my auntie who was caregiving her about her. And she says, no, she's really sick. She needs help. I'm tired, she said. She was doing everything. And there's a lot in doing that work. And so I went and I lived with her, and I, had a couch in her room, and I was there 24 hours. And I called my school and I said, could I compassionately leave my grandmother sick? And she was determined not to be an immediate family member. And so I didn't qualify. And I actually had to get a hold of the Indigenous Services First Nations house. If anybody's watching, they were so great in explaining to the school that this is her immediate family. Right. And there's no place else she should be if this is where she needs to be. And I actually I was giving up this scholarship. I was giving up this program. It felt like everybody's expectations were on me. I didn't even finish my master's. It felt like, a lot of weight on my world, on my shoulders, when I hear people say, oh, our young people, they're going to be the ones who are going to do this, who are going to make everything right for our community. I felt that as a responsibility. But my spirit was telling me where I needed to be. My spirit showed me that in a dream, where I was meant to be. And I went home. And when I got it, then I was talking to the people on the phone when they were encouraging me not to leave. I said, well, I think we're going to have to figure something out that's retroactive, because I already left. I'm not coming back unless I have this, right? And it did happen, and they did, make it happen and make it possible for me to go back. But I was definitely felt like I was working against the grain and making decisions against the grain, and all the expected decisions were in front of me. And then there was my dream telling me what to do. And I've never regretted that decision. I got to spend 3 months with my grandmother. I got to hear her stories over and over again, and I got to, like, every morning that she'd wake up, like, and I'd take care of her, and then we'd talk, and she'd tell me this story, and every single time I acted like it was the first time I heard it. Like, the same old stories, like, but they were beautiful.
I
know? Like, and it was hard. It's hard seeing someone you love and who has sacrificed for you their entire life feel like a burden and struggle to breathe and take breath and to question whether they did enough in this life. But I did that, and I learned, and I earned something for myself that I can rely on. And one of the things that I noticed with my kuko, she prayed every day. We prayed every day with tobacco, and we put it out, but she couldn't go up and down the stairs without a lot of, like, loss of breath. So I'd have my tobacco, and she'd put her tobacco in a little jar, and then I would take the tobacco and I would go and put them both outside for us. And one time, you're not supposed to ask this, like, of elders, you're not supposed to ask this, but I asked it. I said, I just saw her, and her face just looked so beautiful when she's praying. And when I prayed, it was like a wish list, hey, like a Christmas list. Like, I was like, oh, there's sores on my on my kuko's back. Can you heal them? And can you help with the breath? And can you do this? And like, I had this big list of things that I wanted, right, for her and for others. And I go through this list, but she looked so peaceful. And I said, Kuko, what did you pray for? And she said, I remembered about that breeze that came up in the window early this morning, and it carried the scent of the rain that had fallen. And I remembered about my flowers that I planted, that they had that rain, and I gave thanks for that rain because my flowers will drink and be well. And I did. And she had this big list of things she was, like, thankful for, opposite to mine. And then when my son's sitting there and there's all these expectations about, I'm supposed to be working full time. My husband's supposed to be working full time. We're supposed to be implementing the course that's made by the teachers and designed by the teachers at home full time. And then it's really coming to light to me that I expect other people to raise him. And I leave that to other people for 6, 7, 8 hours a day for 5 days. And I haven't been looking because he feels stupid. And he feels like the success in education and in learning is about providing the right answer. And that's not something I believe, And when his teacher had this assignment and he was teaching me, he's like, you got to just say these 3 things you're grateful for. It brought me instantly back to that time that I spent with my kuku. And I said, this is the center. This is the center of our lives. We'll start from here. And everything else goes around it. Like, we get so caught up in feeling busy and feeling behind and remembering all the things that I didn't do and trying to find a way to catch up. That's how I spend my life when I get caught up and away from the center. And ceremonies help me to get to the center. Listening to elders helps me to get to the center. Going around and doing errands and driving from the reserve to all the surrounding towns to pick up, like, potatoes from this place and cucumbers from this place and, like, secondhand store from this place, then dropping it around the community, and dropping off once you pick up a whole bunch of things. Like, that's the center. That helps me to feel the center. Spending time out on the land and fasting paying attention to my dreams, that's the center of me. Minnewanagogishiguk. That's the center of my life. And what I have to offer comes from that center. And I have, not only do I want to give that in the world, and I mean, I'd like to, I'd like to be like, I'm sure people expected me to be tenure professor, to be this, to be that, to do this, to do that. And I walked away from that, to take guardianship of my great nephew, who's also my son, and to raise him near my home, and to make that the center of my life. And I picked up work at the cultural center, which is like probably the best job I could ever have for me, because I get to do a little bit of everything, and I get to work with a little bit of everybody. So for me, but that was taking me away from what's the center. We're responsible for ourselves, and we're responsible for our relatives and for those ones who come into the world who are young. And I want to pass on, by making the choices in my life and living my life, I want this little person to be able to see me and to say, oh, that's what's significant. The way that I was watching my grandmother and my mother, and so everything else went off the table. And, that's one thing that we did every night. We did that sharing circle. And we talked about what we're grateful for. And I went back to my boss and I said, it's not reasonable. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't, he's my priority. I can't make him less than my first priority. And so I went down to 3 days instead of 5. And my husband, we applied through his job to reduce his hours to 3 days. And even then, it's like we're doing 3 days and 3 days and we have 1 day. And so what we do is, I do school in the morning with Kenny, because he's already internalized this idea that he's stupid and can't do schoolwork. So actually, it's so weird. I care about the Ojibwe. That's what I want him to learn. That's what I want to learn. But I'm teaching him math and reading in the morning. And then he earns time away from us on his screens or whatever. And then, my husband's working. And then we cook together. He helps prepare the food for the day for us. And he likes preparing food even if it's not for him. And then we have lunch. And then I have the afternoon to work, and my husband is out. They're doing yard work. They're doing kung fu and physical activity. They're doing dishes and laundry, and they're doing that part. And then we come together and we do our supper together. And then we do our family time. And we prepare. He's getting ready for his first fast. So we do preparation. He's making jam right now and picking berries for giveaway gifts. And so that's what our life is like for 5 days of the week. And then we keep the weekend for our family. And I'm like, even if COVID isn't a concern, I don't know if I want to go back. Like, I think, can we make do with less money? Can we make do with less activity? Because we have only so much time with these young ones. And, in our traditional societies, we were mentored. We were mentored by our families. And for him, like, my mom isn't here, my grandmother isn't here. I'm his great aunt. So I need to make time to bring elders into his life and to make those connections for him. And I need to demonstrate the life in a way that he can understand and watch what's important about life. Because what he got very clearly before this from me was that work was important. And that life, everything else comes second. And that's not the message I want to leave. That's not what I want him to carry and have to undo. I want to work around what's important for us in our life and in our community. And I want to make that relevant to our community. I want to make sure, I'm lucky at the Cultural Center, I can make sure all of our work is relevant to the community. And so, yeah, that's it. That's the hour. That's what I'm doing with my big fancy law degree.
I don't even have words.
I want to be like my cuckoo, you know. People used to meet my grandmother, and I'm nowhere near there, but she was so calm and peaceful. You know, she could make decisions and see them through and see them happen. She could stand up and, you know, she could give you heck too, like as one of her grandchildren, she could give you pretty good heck, but she was so calm. My friends would meet her, and then the next time they'd say, oh yeah, I was driving to Winnipeg, so I drove to your reserve and stopped off and visited your grandma. You know? Like without me, like to go see my cuckoo. Like I always felt like if I had a problem, I could go home. It didn't matter how big the problem was. I could go home and she'd have an answer. She'd have something. She wouldn't answer me directly or tell me what to do, but just being at her table, she would give us a message that I could work on it. It made it seem like, oh, I can do this. Oh, I can, even if this choice doesn't make sense to anybody else, if it makes sense to me, that's the way we can do this. And I want to have a life that makes sense to a child's eyes. Mm-hmm. That's full of not only my mind, but my heart, my spirit and my body. And I want to show him, this is how you live in the world as a full human being.
My heart is so full in such a good way. Thank you. I've just been close to tears this whole time. But I don't think
cried.
I'm just crying here. I'm going to shut down the computer and just let everything sink in. And I know that it sounds like, from what I can observe, you're also a very embodied person, you know, talking about being in the library, reading these old, rusty, conservative men, you know, tracing back and then telling you, and then wanting to vomit and talking about not being able to sleep because your dream was speaking, and, you know, speaking about your mom and having to drink water. And it's amazing to see your embodied ways as well. But one question I do want to ask you is, in my line of work, right, journalism, storytelling, right, these are old traditions, storytelling, carrying knowledge, also trying to shut out that culture of, you know, this journalist gets a Pulitzer Prize. Like I get very creeped out by, and it's in every field, right? There's that Western ideology, colonial influence that comes in. You know, I've been at gatherings where people get like, we're clapping for people because they told a good story about someone else's suffering. Like, to me, it's twisted backwards. But anyways, within this work, one of the things that I try and challenge myself to do and speak about with other storytellers, other journalists, media makers, is how to decentralize colonial ideologies, worldviews, but laws as well. So I found myself, you know, covering maybe an important court case, but I've noticed that I'll say, you know, I'll do the same thing that Canada does, saying, well, they have, you know, rights under Section 35. There are rights that exist here. And the United Nations, there's internationally recognized rights. What words can you put around that process of decentralizing Canadian law and legal systems and worldviews, and recognizing that they exist, but recognizing as well that they're not the only legal system that exists?
Yeah. That's back to our other interview.
It is, yeah.
I guess, because that's my process of learning. Like, I want to learn good decision making, which we need to carry our law. But I think for me, my understanding of law is different for Anishinaabe law, Onakinagewin. And this is just my thoughts. I haven't heard it. I haven't had it confirmed. I haven't, you know, but these are my thoughts. Like, I think for Anishinaabe law, when you learn it in a context, like if you learn about the pipe ceremony, if you learn about like harvesting protocol, if you learn about all these, it's just in this one context, you can learn what to do. But looking underneath about how does it all apply, that's what I think about our law, is that it's not actually human made. We don't make the law. For us, I think we believe that it already exists. And that law can be seen in life when life flows in a good way. And when we are operating and choosing within that law, our life can flow well. It has a flow because there are so many spirits and beings and relatives who are helping us to do that. They're showing up in our dreams. They're showing up, on our fast. They're showing up and showing us how to get back to a good way, how to get back to what's real, how to get back to a good life. And for Anishinaabe law, how it interacts with Western law is very human-centered. That humans are involved in making the law, and humans are involved in choosing the law. Even choosing, everything's based on choice. You can choose to give up and rights-based, choose to give up your rights to do this. And usually it's ownership over plants, ownership over animals, ownership over territories, ownership over people, ownership over decision-making, ownership of when to exclude people from wealth and when to include people. It's the majority of the law I learned was about ownership.
And that goes back to the people that you mentioned. That goes back to Locke and Hobbes and Kant. That goes back to that European conservative.
And I could ask my kuko. I always ask my grandmother. I asked elders. I asked traditional people, community people, and they would say, "Oh, I don't know," when they get these terminologies. And I'd say, "Well, what's really underneath that idea of rights? Is that they get to decide what our relationship is to that tree. There's people in there that rights are relationships, and you exclude people from those relationships, and you include people from those relationships." And to us, and it's about relationships between people, about things. But we don't believe that those beings are things. Those are our relatives, our elder brothers and sisters. They're the ones we look to help us. They're the ones we look to ask when we take their lives to eat. And we pay that back when we're going out fasting, when we, return ourselves to the earth in a natural way at the end of our life. When we honor them, when we give thanks, when we have feasts, when we do giveaways, when we do ceremonies, we're always giving thanks for all of that life that we've taken just to live. Those are our relatives. So when I kind of bring it back to the foundation, my grandmother could say "Oh no, that's not our way. We think this way." She didn't think she knew anything about law, but she knew how to do things in a good way. You ask, you put offerings out, and you ask before you take. You include people in decision making. It's not just about making the right decision. It's also about being able to bring people together and to hear people, because everybody has a piece of it. Everybody has a name. Everybody has a purpose and a responsibility. Everybody has certain gifts and skills that they excel at. Every clan has a gift. So being able to come together and put our best minds together, that's governance. That's law. And it's not about rights. It's about relationships and responsibilities. And I think that for Aboriginal law and Indian law and that kind of rights-based, even international Indigenous law, and that rights-based idea about how to exclude people from our own traditional territories has really affected our communities and our leadership, because we want to exclude people from relationship to our land because they're making really bad decisions, and they're running amok, right? Creating big messes for all of us. And we were forcefully excluded from our lands, but Fighting that in a Western frame includes us in that thinking of ownership over the land, where our teachings tell us we were placed upon this earth with our relatives who were here before us, who were trained into acknowledging and remembering every day, every minute, every season, every year, every lifetime, to remember them, to think of them, to honor them, to give thanks to them, and to kind of earn that relationship, you know? So that's, to me, for me, I think we really have to be careful of those relationships between Onakinagewin and between like Western law, because we're looking to include ourselves in decision making over things that are very important to us, our relatives, and decision making that we're excluded by. But we're also trying to exclude people from that decision making. And that's not the form of our law. I really like Lee Miracle. She posted something on Facebook. It's a quote from her grandfather. And it's something like, I was a student of hers. I always remember her saying that her grandfather said, like people are of the nation, you know, even the non-Indigenous people are of our nation because they live here. You know, they're just not very good at it. And so I'm not saying that non-Indigenous people are Indigenous to this land, but Indigenous people, Anishinaabe, are responsible for everybody in Anishinaabe territory as humans, because we're all humans and we all are younger than every other being in this territory. And so for me, the style of thinking, what I would like to see is Anishinaabe being Anishinaabe, being able to show each other, find who we are as Anishinaabe people, being able to work with each other, to deal with conflict, to deal with healing, to address those things and actually work together. The way that, I don't know, I remember the best way that I remember my community and my family working well together is when there was a funeral and people were grieving. You know, everybody came together to take care of each other. That's the best. That to me was the best that I saw of that, and that's what drew me to ceremonies and see people asking for life, you know, and answering that together, and asking to be married or to have a name or to welcome a new baby, or like everything about all the ceremonies we have as life, to have your first fast, and working together to answer that. That's what I want to see Anishinaabe doing, not just in ceremonial life, not just in personal life, but in governance life as well. And for us to be able to show that and demonstrate that to other people whose laws have become not about life. Because we can't just use their rules. Western law is all about consent, like that Indigenous people can consent to certain things, that they can give up their relationship to certain lands, that they can give up their relationships to each other, that they can give up. It's all about freeing an ownership over the land and the territory and decision-making from Indigenous people. That's what the law is about. And for me, if we know our own law, we know we have a very limited capacity to consent as humans. Even if we have the right at international law to consent and make these kinds of treaties, we can't consent out of our responsibilities to our relatives who've always been there for us, you know, and who I hope will always be there for our descendants. So there could be Indigenous people in leadership consenting to things, but to me, that doesn't play at Anishinaabe law.
Dawnis, is there anything else that you would like to share?
No, I just hope everybody has a good day. And that for me too, I was kind of shy about the little byline on the poster, but you know, I make mistakes. I'm learning every day. I make mistakes, and I sit with things that I'm troubled by for a long time. I'm always looking and, hoping for an opening to address things that I don't feel able to address in a good way. But so that's me. I'm like a real live human being. And I encourage people, like look to people, look to your elders, look to, if they say they don't know anything, don't believe them. Don't believe them. Just keep following them around anyway. And,
Yeah.
And they don't have to know everything. And they don't have to always be right for us to learn from each other. We all have something. Each one of us has something. And each one of us is always going to carry that. And then we have everything that we earn for ourselves. And, we just got to keep putting that together. Even if we can't feel like we can't do everything, we can put together what we can. And I think if we continue to do that, we'll find our way to a very beautiful life for all of us.
Hi, Chimigwech.
Yeah.
Thank you. You can share with your son tonight in your sharing circle that my gratitude pieces today are this time with you, this time with you, everything that you've shared today, and health.
Yeah.
Health in one way or another that's trying to evolve and trying to be strong. So thank you so much for everything that you shared today. Just I feel my heart feels very full, and when you were talking about wanting to know what's real, I can really relate to that. Wanting to know what's real, wanting to know what's true. I've always been a really big, that's why I'm in this work that I'm in, understanding my responsibility, seeking truth. And there's something to be said about, in terms of embodied knowing or just listening, what happens in your body when you hear things. And so as I'm sitting here listening to you, to feel the good feelings in my heart and to feel my body and to feel the water, in my eyes, and, that's good medicine. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Emily.
Take good care. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in.